This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. Okay. Hi, guys. It is Margot. It is Thursday, the 18th. So this is going to be the crime episode for the week. So I did a bonus Monday, Tuesday about the wedding. I'm interested. It was very long and I probably rambled way too much. So I'm interested to see if people liked it, hated it, whatnot. Here comes the cat. And then, this episode that I have today, it's probably going to be a multi-part episode. I had most of it written, and then I went to finish it and was like, oh shit, there's so much more. We'll see. I never know if it's going to be a 1-part or 2-part until I actually record it. But based on like the amount of time it took to write it, I feel like this is going to be a 2 or 3-part. It's pretty long. Although when I do them by myself, which I am today, they tend to go faster. We'll see though. I'm getting really good at just having full conversations with myself on this Zoom computer. So I'm doing it on video as well as audio because I don't know if anybody cares about having these on video. Like, it is not interesting. It's just me sitting here in the office looking like a mess. But maybe I'll at some point make social media clips with the video. I don't know. What I would like to do is take this video and then before I put it on Patreon, take the time to, like, when I'm talking about something, have a image of that come up or image of the things that I'm talking about. That takes a fair amount of time. So, but I would like to do that. I think that would make the video worth doing and worth watching, maybe. So let's see. I hope everyone's having a great week. I took Henry to the vet today, and Henry is so good. I'm always surprised by what a good dog he is. And I forget because he's never around other dogs because I get nervous because he likes to play pretty harsh. Like, he's not like a gentle player. Like when him and Indiana play, they play pretty intense. And when we see other dogs, he barks. Now, he's also wagging his tail, so he's not barking. It sounds aggressive and scary. He's half Rottweiler, half boxer, is what the vet thinks. So his bark sounds really scary and aggressive. Like if he sees a dog when we're driving, he sees a dog out the window on this, like walking on the sidewalk, he'll like bark. And I've reprimanded him so much that now it comes out kind of more like a whine. And today at the vet, like one of the vet techs came in and he was so excited. His whole body was shaking, but she pet him and then he started barking at her. And for somebody who's not familiar with dogs, obviously this woman was, I would be terrified, and I'm not scared of dogs at all. But his like tail's wagging in his body. It's essentially him being like, pay attention to me, pet me more. I'm so excited, but it doesn't sound like that. And he was attacked once. Nothing happened. I was able to intervene and like pick him up. He was smaller at the time, in Atlanta by 2 dogs at a dog park. He used to love the dog park, but he also used to play pretty rough. I don't know where I was going with this, except for to say that aside from that, he's such a good dog. Like, just we were in one of the exam room we were in also had some bunny rabbits in crates. He was very interested, but he just sat there. So I brought him in because he's been wheezing and coughing lately. And something that's super common I know in Tucson, I don't know if it's the entire Southwest, is called valley fever. And it's like spores in the dust and dirt that infect your lungs, and it causes basically a respiratory infection, but that can be really bad and can move into other parts of your body. And so when he sleeps, he wheezes. When he barks, like in between his barking, like when he takes a breath, it's like pretty labored. So just to be if you catch it early enough, a lot of dogs will just fight it off by themselves, and you just kind of treat the cough and he's going to start some allergy medication. He's a pretty tough dog. I don't know if you remember when he broke his lower jaw. I'm sure I talked about that on here. That was just a few months ago. So he's a really tough dog. I'm guessing he can fight it off, but just wanted to be extra careful. So I took him in, and he did great. She listened to his lungs and took his temperature and looked in his mouth, and just perfect. I love this vet. I know I've talked about her before. I love that they don't make him get up on a table. She gets down on the floor with him and just took his blood right there, right in his chest. He didn't need to be, muzzled or restrained. He was just such a good boy. He was so good. So we'll get those results hopefully next week and find out. And like that. And so I'm not gonna do a sense of place, but I wanted to share something that I watched last night. So this is gonna sound weird because I'm about to do a true crime podcast. So you would think I'm obsessed with true crime, which I have been, but I tend to go through kind of phases or spurts where I'm super into one genre or the next. Now, when I read, I love a thriller, I guess crime type novel. I'm reading the third installment in this book series by Frida McFadden called is it The Housemaid? I think it's The Housemaid. But when it comes to TV, I don't know. Sometimes I I'll go through a period where all I want to watch is something like The Office, Schitt's Creek, things like that. Or I went through a real big phase of The Good Wife and then The Good Fight, which is legal drama. Never really get into medical drama stuff. That's too emotional. And then true crime as well. I need to stop saying true crime. I guess crime. Because true crime, I used to love nothing more on a Friday night than settling down with a good murder episode of Dateline. And I've gotten away from that in the past few years. I really, outside of this podcast, don't listen to true crime, don't really watch it. But maybe a week ago, I started rewatching Criminal Minds, which is not true crime, but it is about crime and murder and stuff, about the behavior of criminals. And it's fascinating. I actually got a notebook and I'm taking notes while I watch it because there's so much information about the way that a rapist or various types of murderers, how they think and how they become that way. And it's very, very interesting. So I feel that kind of what is the word I'm looking for? I don't know. Reinterested me in and then maybe watching some more true crime. So I randomly put on yesterday it's a 3-part documentary on Hulu called The Perfect Wife. And it's about the disappearance of a woman named Sherry Papini. I had never heard this story. I'd never heard of her. So I had no idea. So I was watching it totally I didn't know how it was going to end up. And I thought for sure the first episode, maybe even into the second episode, I was like, it's definitely the husband. Like, she's dead now for sure. And the husband killed her. Definitely. So I guess I shouldn't, I think it's new. So I won't say what actually happened. That may have actually happened. I kind of just gave stuff away, didn't I? I'll stop talking about what happens. But maybe I'll talk about it next week. That's what I should do. Sorry, guys. I just don't want to like ruin it for anybody who wants to watch it and be surprised, because I was surprised. I won't say I was like on the edge of my seat watching it, but I definitely was like, I thought I knew what was going to happen. And then what I thought was going to happen did not happen. But what did happen is between that and then all the Criminal Minds that I kind of just have playing in the background when I'm working or falling asleep or whatever. And some of them I'm paying more attention to, like I said, and taking notes. But that combined, so this docu-series combined with Criminal Minds, combined with, I put on this morning. So when I walk every morning, and I usually either make videos for Patreon, talk on the phone, listen to music, or lately I've been trying to learn Spanish with this incredible Spanish podcast that's really good. But today I decided, for whatever reason, I'm going to listen to a podcast that's not Spanish, that's not learning Spanish. And I started listening to, let me look it up because I'm not going to remember. I think I'm only on episode 3. Oh, The Problem with Eric. So it's called, it's from Texas Monthly, which I believe is a magazine or an online publication. And each season, so this is season 4. I'm assuming each season, let's see, I didn't even look that deeply into it. Yeah, each season is a different crime murder story in Texas. And so I just this happened to catch my eye, the new season 4. So I'm listening to that, and it's pretty good. It really made me want to take the time to do something more like this, where instead of having each episode be different, and I know we talk about 1,000 different ways that we're going to change this podcast all the time, and it keeps being the same thing, which is fine, but I would love to do like a Death by Southwest mini series that is, multiple episodes focusing on one particular crime and like really going through it piece by piece. But then when I start thinking about that, I think, well, I feel like you can't just research it online like I do. Like I would need to like really take the time to investigate this, like try to reach out to anybody who is involved, police, detectives, family members, friends, and like try to get something new. So, because I think it's pretty hard to tell a story that's worthy of multiple episodes that hasn't already been told. Maybe, I don't know. If anybody has any ideas, I'm always welcome. And which reminds me, thank you for multiple people have been sending story suggestions. So thank you for that. I definitely appreciate that. They all go on to a list, and eventually we'll get to all of them. There's no rhyme or reason to how I pick which case is next. It's just kind of whatever catches my eye. But yeah, I think it would be hard to find something that hasn't been done in some way, whether it be like a Dateline or there's a million investigative discovery shows or podcasts. So in order to make it worthwhile or interesting, I feel like I would need to bring some level of new information, if not, and also hopefully new way of telling the story. I think it would be really interesting to do something like that. I also thought it would be really interesting to find like a missing persons case here in Tucson that was never solved, and, go down. I mean, I'm not an investigator, obviously, but just go down that road and see what I could see. I don't know how that works though. Like, are you able to just go to the police and ask to see the files on this case? I'm doubting that, but again, I'll throw that one to you guys. If you have any insight into how that would work, let me know. or any cases that you know of here in Tucson, missing people, or cases that you think would be a good like multi episode, like deep dive. So anyways, between the Problem with Eric podcast, the Perfect Wife docuseries, and then Criminal Minds, what keeps like glaringly popping up in my head is you don't ever really fucking know somebody. Like, holy shit, people are, and I just am saying people because there's no, like, looking at just these 3 different like pieces of media that I've been listening to, watching, there's no rhyme or reason to like who these criminals and various levels of criminal for sure, but criminals are men, women, young, old, all ethnicities, all ethnicities. I will say there's a far, far greater population of, at least in these stories, of men that are the criminals, but certainly not always. Criminal Minds, definitely. It's like 90% it's a man. I don't know. That just struck me. I guess I don't really have much more to say on it, except for that it really keeps popping into my head that, oh my gosh, people are so deceitful and so manipulative and such good liars. And I do try to still believe that most people in general are good, are not inherently bad or evil. But when you, like Mark and I spent several hours, we woke up early Saturday morning and just like binged Criminal Minds. And usually he would never watch that. So I don't know why he's into it, but he kind of is. And like watching episode after episode after episode of just like the most horrific, heinous, calculated, terrible people. We watched an episode the other night that was this sexual sadist. That's a word that I've heard a lot lately from Criminal Minds. And and I watched a Dateline yesterday. Like, becoming sexually aroused from someone else's actual horrific pain. I know that that's a thing, and that there are probably more people than any of us would like to believe that exists, that's a thing for them. I just can't, I can't understand it. And I wonder if sometimes the sorry for Patreon people, like my nose is really runny. So I feel like in this video, I'm just constantly wiping my nose. Apologies. And there's a bunch of cat hair floating around in here. I wonder if the people who are sexual sadists can understand it. Like if they can pinpoint like, well, this happened to me when I was younger, which is another common theme. Like, whoa, do our childhoods really impact who we are? And for a lot of people in really negative ways. But do those people like understand? Can they pinpoint what caused them to be that way? What spurred that feeling inside them? I mean, I don't know. There was a really sad Criminal Minds where this a bunch of prostitutes in DC were winding up killed, and this kid, like 16 maybe, he went to one of the FBI. I'm never going to be able. I won't be able to. I think Mark said this before. I'm not great sometimes at like retelling a TV show and the kind of plot of it, which is weird because I tell stories on here. But basically, this kid, he kind of like went to the FBI and was like asking all these questions. And they were like, this kid is asking. He's inserting himself in the investigation. He might be our unsub, and come to find out he's not. But he is fascinated with these prostitutes being killed. And it turns him on and it's scaring him. And he really goes to FBI for help, to be like, I don't understand what's happening to me. I don't understand why this is happening. Can I stop it? Can I fix it? Can I get help? And, their evaluation basically was he needs to be institutionalized. Like, it's admirable that he hasn't killed anybody and he's trying to figure this out, but those urges are going to eventually take over. And it was really depressing to me. I mean, what a shitty, hand you've been dealt if you want so badly to just be aroused. And normally, I'm saying normally with air quotes, but be aroused from like somewhat normal things, not the stabbing to death of someone of the opposite sex. So I've really kicked this episode off on a high note. This is not depressing at all. But I just wanted to, I don't know. These are all things I'm keeping a little notebook these days, writing down things that happen or pop into my mind so that I can just share them on here with you. Yeah, I had more about the perfect wife thing to share, but now I realize that I should not. So I don't know. I think that's all I got. A bunch of cat hair on this microphone. And I'm sure that this is a longer intro than most people want. 21 minutes, man. I can really talk about anything for a while. So, all right. Well, let's jump into our story. I should make a note. 21 minutes, story starts. And I'll put that in the episode notes for people who hate the sound of my voice just rambling. So, like I said, this episode may be a multi-parter, so we'll see. But we're going to start by... Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry, guys. I've watched and listened to so much true crime that I just opened up my notes. I'll take a screenshot. I don't know if I've ever shared the app. It's a computer app and a phone app that I use called Mila Note. I'm sure I've mentioned it. And it allows me to write the episode in a series of cards. And I don't know. I'll have to I'm not going to explain it well. I'll have to take a screenshot and post it. But I was looking at this and I was like, wait, which one is this? Because I've watched so much lately, but I got it. I remember. So this takes place in Austin. I'm not going to talk about Austin because we have definitely had episodes here before. I've already talked for far too long. So we're just going to jump in and I'm going to tell you about Diane Holik, who is 43 years old at the time of our story. She is, friends described her as magnetic, as living life with gusto, endlessly adventurous, always kind of pushing boundaries and testing the edges. She loved to be social. She loved to be around people. She was definitely an extrovert. She threw big parties at her house. Anytime, in any room, one of her friends said, if any room she's in, any crowd she's in, she's kind of the star. Like, she was a magnet for both men and women. Everyone was really drawn to her. Very close with her friends and family. Had a great group of friends. Loved to vacation with them. Loved to go clubbing and dancing with them. A funny story that one of her friends told, she was at some bar or club one night and went to the bathroom, and there were these two other women in the bathroom, Anita and Sharon, and she, complimented one of them on something and introduced herself, and Anita and Sharon, they all started talking. Anita and Sharon said, yeah, we're actually going to head over to this country western bar. And Diane was like, oh, great. I'm going to come with you. Okay. Just met these women, doesn't even know them, but they seemed nice. They kind of all hit it off in the bathroom. And she said, I'm going to come with you, but hold on. On our way there, I need to stop at my car because I'm not really dressed for a country western bar. And they said she just stripped down into her underwear right there in the parking lot, threw her clothes in the car, pulled out more country western-y type attire, and was like, all right, let's go. So she was just kind of free-spirited like that. She worked from home for IBM. She was a recruiter, and she was apparently quite good at it. She was living in Houston and then ended up moving to Austin, I think for work. Yeah. And so that brings us to Austin. And we're going to start this story on the afternoon of November 15th, 2001, around 4 in the afternoon. This afternoon in Austin, there was a big storm coming. The air was really thick and humid. All the news channels and stations were advising everyone, if you don't have to go out tonight, please don't. With each passing minute, the sky turned darker and darker, and there was a fear that this could be a storm that brought tornadoes with it. And sure enough, after not too long, several twisters had been spotted headed towards various parts of the city, including the northwest part of the city, which is where Diane lived. So one of Diane's friends called her and said, hey, there are tornadoes headed right in your direction. And Diane was like, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't know what to do. I've never been in a tornado. And, her friend advised her, I don't know if she had a basement or not, but advised her, of what you're supposed to do. And Diane was like, oh, all right, I'll call you back. They hung up. Growing up in Chicago, we had tornado drills all the time in school. And so I know like a basement for sure, if you have one. And then if you don't, a doorway, or like a stable part, away from windows, basically. So the next morning, Friday morning, storm had cleared. The city went back to normal. Everyone was up, hustling and bustling, going to work. Friends and family were calling to check in on each other, make sure everyone's okay. And including Diane, her friends, her family, and even her coworkers were calling to check on her because Diane had a conference call that day that she didn't show up for online. And that was very, very unlike her. So all day, her phone was ringing and people from IBM, her friends, and all of them were going to voicemail. She never picked up. No one had heard anything from Diane. So apparently Diane was supposed to meet her friend out at a club that Friday night. And so her friend called, got the voicemail, said, are you going to make it? I'm heading out now. I'll meet you there. Her friend went to the club and waited, but Diane never showed. So people are getting a little bit worried now. Like, did her house get hit from the tornado? Did she go outside and did something, a tree limb fall on her? Maybe something happened. And the most kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? The easiest answer at the moment, that wasn't the word, by the way, but the easiest answer at the moment is to think that it must have been something from the storm, because this was a really bad storm the night before. So a coworker eventually, either later that day or the next day, called the police and said, look, one of my coworkers has not checked in, can't get a hold. Can you go over there and check on her, please? Just do like a wellness check at her house. So these police officers went over to her neighborhood. It was a pretty affluent northwest neighborhood of Austin. She had a quite large house. They pulled up. The house looked fine. Didn't see any damage. Walked around the house, peered through the windows, didn't see anything. And then I don't know how, but they secured a key. I don't know if they went to a neighbor, they found a key under the mat. Either way, they managed to get their hands on a key. And since no one was answering the door, they let themselves in. They announced themselves and walked throughout the house. Didn't see anything, went upstairs. And there, hidden behind the bed in the guest room, they found Diane. And Diane was no longer alive. So the call went out over the radio for more police officers. I actually don't know if somebody is pronounced a DOA, if they call, I'm guessing they don't call paramedics. coroner, I'd assume. But detectives were called, and there was little information put out over the radio, which was interesting. I heard one of the detectives say when very little information is given on a call out, like when you call out over the radio, you assume there's going to be a lot of information at the scene when you show up. So the two detectives that were, responded to this were really hopeful that they were like, okay, well, we don't really know what this involves. We're hopeful that the scene will have a good amount of information. And unfortunately, it didn't. They were pretty disappointed by the lack of evidence they found in Diane's home. There was no forced entry. The doors were locked. The windows were all intact. So that led them to believe that either whoever had done this had a key to her house, or she let them in willingly. And as I was researching this, and I read that multiple times, like she let them in willingly. And I feel like there's a third option here. What if she opened her door and someone was there with a knife or a gun and like she was forced to let them in? So that's not willingly. And that should really be considered as an option. And maybe it was, and it just wasn't stated. So who knows? She still had her watch on. She had a pretty expensive looking tennis bracelet on, and they found a charm stuck in her hair that had clearly come from a necklace that she had been wearing. There were also a few dollar bills sticking out of her pocket. So they were, initially they were like, well, this doesn't look like a robbery. They also were looking for any fingerprints, but there was almost no fingerprints throughout the house, not even Diane's. So it seemed like someone had wiped the place clean. So even though the scene told them very little, they were hoping maybe her body would tell them more. So her body had been hidden under a bedspread on the floor next to the bed. So like you walk in the room, here's the bed. She wasn't on the side of the bed that you would see right away. She was on the other side of the bed and had a bedspread covering her body. It appeared that she had been strangled. She had ligature marks around her neck. They thought maybe a rope or an exercise band, but it was very evidently not someone's hand. So they had not used their hands to strangle her. She had petechia in the eyes, which is common of strangulation, a bruise on her cheek, and some more bruises on her stomach. But they were described not necessarily as, they said bruises, but then the further description was they kind of looked like burn marks, like almost like rug burn, or rubbing. Something had rubbed these kind of burn looking bruises. There were smudges of lipstick and mascara on the carpet. And this really broke my heart a bit. There was a spot of urine on the carpet, not where her body had been found, but they figured that it was probably where she had been strangled. It was more in the middle of the bedroom, so they thought that this is where she was probably initially killed and then moved behind the bed. And that, I don't know why that just, it like was a, people say a gut punch. It felt like a heart punch. It felt like, you're so terrified in the last moments of your life that you pee yourself a little bit. I also know that could have been just a reaction in her body that she couldn't control, but I don't know. My head goes to that she was so scared she peed, and that's, I don't like it. So her clothes were not messed up. There was nothing to really indicate a sexual assault. No, everything was intact, all of her clothes. There were also no scratch marks on her neck, which one of the detectives mentioned they thought was strange because generally if somebody's being strangled with a ligature, they'll do everything they can to try and stop it from strangling them, which often results in them scratching their own neck. They did notice, she could have been restrained also, and that may be why there weren't any scratch marks on her neck. And they did notice faint red marks on her wrists, But there were no ties, no rope, no tape. Nothing was left behind. So whatever was used to strangle her and potentially to restrain her was removed from the scene. They did find little red marks around her wrist, and there were two very close together parallel lines, and then lots of little perpendicular lines next to those that were described as being about a 1/16 of an inch apart. And one of the detectives immediately thought, this looks like the impression that zip ties leave when we use zip ties on a suspect. When they have to restrain somebody, they have those like cuff-looking zip ties. So they thought possibly the person, whoever did this, did have zip ties around her wrists, but obviously cut them off and took them with them afterwards. And because of this real lack of evidence, lack of fingerprints, the detectives, their first thoughts were, well, this person didn't leave right away, because they erased any sign of themselves in the house. And that takes time. That takes a little bit of time. So usually, the most common behavior is to, if you murder somebody, to get the fuck out of there quickly. But this killer clearly didn't, because the house was like pristine, just perfectly clean. Nothing was out of place. Also, the fact that Diane had been tied up and assaulted, and the weapons, I guess, whatever ligature and zip ties and whatnot had been removed and taken with them, likely means that this killer brought them with them also, meaning that it's a premeditated attack. Either way, there was very few answers, and a whole lot of questions at this point. They didn't have a ton of answers from the scene. So their first step was to learn more about Diane and find out kind of who was in her immediate inner circle in life. So they went and they talked to all those people, her friends, her family. And from her friends, they learned that she had been married once before, many, many years ago, but had spent most of her adult life as a single woman, and very happily single. She, for most of her adult life, loved being single, until she turned 40. And her friend said that it was right around when she turned 40 that she wanted to change. She didn't want to be single anymore. She told them, I really want what all of you guys have in a partner and a husband. I want to get married. I want to have someone to share my life with. So she joined the dating service called It's Just Lunch, which is really funny because I worked for It's Just Lunch here in Tucson back in 2003, 2004. It was like the most grown-up job I ever really had, because I had my own office and I had to wear a suit, and I was a dating coordinator, which sounds really fun. And I actually might really like doing that today. I think back then I was too young to appreciate it, but it was just, I think I've talked about this. It was just looking at, back then it was paper profiles. People filled out paperwork. It had their picture on their favorite everything about them, preferences. And I would go through all the men and all the women and be like, okay, well, this guy's looking for this, this, and this. And then I go through them and be like, does she fit this? Well, not totally, but she might. And then I call them both and set them up on lunch dates. Yeah, it was in retrospect pretty cool. So anyways, so Diane joined the dating service It's Just Lunch, and she went on a handful of dates and then met a divorced father of two named Dennis Conley. The two immediately had chemistry. He was handsome, a successful businessman. He liked to take her everywhere with him and show her off. I don't think I gave a description of Diane. Diane was very pretty, bright blue, green eyes, blonde hair, very fit, a big smile. She looked very friendly and warm. She was very attractive. And Dennis was also very attractive. So they began dating, and after 2 months, he proposed. And not only did he propose, but he proposed with a $20,000 engagement ring. And it was huge, huge. He had 2 daughters, and she loved his daughters. So this was a really happy occasion for all of them. The daughters were happy. Diane was thrilled. Dennis was thrilled. And funnily enough, I said earlier that Diane had moved from Houston to Austin. Well, Dennis either had moved or was in the process of moving from Austin to Houston when, he met Diane and they got engaged and stuff. So he was going to be in Houston. Diane was going to be in Austin, but the plan was for her to sell her house, and then she'd move to Houston and they would buy a house or build a house together. So she put her house on the market and was hoping to find, I guess it was a down market at the time in 2001, but she had several people who were interested. She told her friend kind of right off the bat, it was a big, beautiful house. And so she was pretty hopeful that she was going to be able to sell it. So armed with this new information about Diane's love life, detectives went over the scene and what they knew so far. So again, the scene didn't present itself as a robbery. However, based on this new information that they got from Diane's friends, they realized that, yeah, fine, her watch, her tennis bracelet, the money in her pocket, all that, and the rest of the house, it looked like everything was in place. But there was one thing that was missing. That $20,000 engagement ring was nowhere to be found. So, as we know, with most crimes, murders, when people are in a relationship, you look to their partner. So police are interested in, where is Dennis? Where was he during this violent storm? And where is he now? They wanted to talk to him. So while they were tracking Dennis down, they did continue to speak to Diane's friends. And Diane's friends, most of her close friends, said, we do believe that Diane was truly in love. But we also, we all know and understand that love is not always a smooth, perfectly smooth ride. It can be a bit bumpy sometimes. And especially, when you move quickly, and Diane and Dennis had moved very quickly. They were engaged after 2 months. So the friend said, there were some issues. They did begin to argue a bit. Various things. One major sticking point was Diane's dogs. So she had 2 what looked like golden retrievers. They were kind of that amber colored golden retriever, which are so beautiful. And she said these dogs were like her children. I know people with children hate that. But that's what she said. That's how she felt. And Dennis did not care for, he didn't want dogs in the house. I don't know if he didn't like dogs or what, but he certainly didn't want any dogs in his house. So that was an ongoing argument between them. The friends also said that he was somewhat controlling. He frequently told her, I don't want you going out or doing this or doing that. I don't have really any specifics, but he would ask her to not do things and to do things, and she wouldn't listen. She was not that type of woman. She did not take orders from anyone, and she had always been very independent. And if he asked her not to do something that she saw no problem with, she would do it. And she'd say, you know what, I'm sorry, it's too bad. Like I'm going to go here because I want to. That caused some friction. And even though she never took off the engagement ring, after they got engaged for a while, it was kind of shaky. It was on and then it was off and then on again. Not the ring, but the engagement. The fighting between them and the disagreements, it increased progressively. And even though she told her friends, I love him so much, but I'm just not sure that I can see how this is going to work. And after a while, he's now in Houston. She's still in Austin trying to sell her house. And they're still together, but it's on shaky ground. So she told her friends that she actually set up a date with another man through the dating service. And one of her friends said, if you're still wanting to go on other dates, even when things are not great with Dennis, like just because you're fighting doesn't mean you should be wanting to go on other dates. And if you are, maybe you're not ready for marriage. And Diane just kind of like blew it off and was like, no, I'm just going to go on this date and see how it goes. So to kind of add to the detective's interest in finding and talking to Dennis, Anita, one of Diane's good friends, said, I've seen Dennis angry before. And he kind of had a temper. And she said, I wonder, did he find out about her dating someone else and just like lose it? It's a possibility. Detectives tracked down Dennis and asked to speak to him. He agreed to come in and talk to them. He said, they offered, you want to bring your lawyer? He said, no, I don't need a lawyer. And he came in. They wanted to focus on the timeline first. They told Dennis they believed that she had been killed that stormy Thursday night or evening. Her body had been discovered around 5:30 p.m. on Friday the next day. This is also the first time that Dennis is hearing about her being dead, his fiance. So he's visibly upset, but managed to keep himself pretty composed. He told officers that he was at his office in Houston on Thursday night, but had exchanged online messages with Diane that afternoon, just basically saying like, I'm gonna be here working late. And she said, okay, I love you. That was about it. He got home late Thursday evening. And then he said, and then I was back at the office early Friday morning. So they looked at the timeline of, could Dennis have left work late Thursday night, like late, like 8, 9, 10 o'clock, driven to Austin, killed Diane, cleaned up, and driven back to Houston in time to make it to work the next the next morning very early. And, their conclusion was, yeah, he probably could have. That's feasible. They did find several messages from Dennis on Diane's answering machine that he left. He left one Friday morning that said, quote, hey, if I don't hear from you in about an hour, I'm calling the freaking police and I'm going to have them go by your house. Okay. And then there was another message on Saturday morning and it said, quote, Diane, what is going on? Give me a call. You have me worried to death. Bye. Okay. At this point, sure. If he has nothing to do with it, those are reasonable messages to leave. Even if he does have something to do with it, did he leave those messages to kind of cover up? Make it seem like he was concerned when he wasn't? They didn't know. These are just questions they still have. Now, Dennis did admit when they were questioning him and talking to him, he said, yeah, we have been having some trouble. We have been having some fights, but he said, we don't really fight. We have disagreements. And he said something I thought was interesting. He said, everybody carries baggage, especially at this age, and our baggage is just clashing at the moment, but we're working on it. Although we did recently decide to take a break from being engaged. He also said that they were going to therapy, which was helping a lot. He said they were making a lot of great breakthroughs. He said they made a breakthrough about the dogs. Apparently he was going to allow the dogs. And not long before she died, Dennis said that she made a point to say to him, I love you. And I do want to marry you no matter how long it takes. We're going to work through our differences and I want to be with you. He told the detectives that there was never any physical fights, never even really angry or loud words. They didn't even really like shout at each other. They didn't call each other names. He said that she always gave him a hard time and kind of thought he should be more of a handyman type guy, kind of like her dad was. And he thought that she should be more appreciative. He didn't elaborate on that, so I don't know appreciative about what. Because it sounds like Diane was successful, had her own money, so I'm not sure. The detective asked Dennis, said, is Diane faithful? Has she been faithful to you? And he said, quote, I would be shocked if she wasn't. I would be stunned. Unfortunately for Dennis, this was his version of the truth. This was his story of their relationship. And it didn't quite match what Diane's friends had said. However, Dennis readily offered up his fingerprints, his DNA. I don't know what's happening with my voice today, guys. Sorry. His DNA. And the police told him, we're going to check your alibi. He said, okay, please do. Before he left the police station, he brought up another name. He said, hey, has anybody gotten a hold of Ray? And police said, no, but we've actually been trying to figure out who Ray is. Who is he? Dennis said, oh, he's a colleague of Diane's at IBM. Dennis told them Ray kind of worships the ground that Diane walks on. Dennis said, I think Ray is attracted to women that are not attracted to him. And then Dennis said, quote, if I was a woman, he would give me the creeps for sure. Dennis also told police that Ray and Diane had a little falling out about a month ago. So police are now like, let's fucking talk to Ray. Who is Ray? So, who is Ray? His name is Raphael Chauncey. And Ray, Diane had actually hired Ray. So she was kind of his boss. Friends of Diane said that Ray was they referred to him as Johnny on the spot, which is something a saying I'd never heard before. But basically every time Diane needed something, he was there. Like she needed anything, he was suddenly there, ready to help. He always took care of her dogs if she was out of town, always took care of her house if she was out of town. The friends really believed that he loved Diane and that he would have married her. Dennis thought that Ray was obsessed with her in a weird way. The police also were told that Ray had a key to Diane's house because he would watch her dogs. So somebody who's obsessed with her, it's kind of like an unrequited love thing, and has a key to her house. He's looking pretty good. Of course, they also aren't sure about Dennis at this point, but they're going to, they want to talk to everybody. So Ray came into the station to answer questions. And I actually saw parts of this interview. And Ray was kind of the one with a lot of questions, actually. He was very eager to help. He was almost too eager, it seemed. He was like excited and proud to share everything he knew about Diane. It reminded me of like a teenager or even younger, because I'm thinking back to the kids that I used to teach. Like when they would become start dating someone new or become obsessed with a new celebrity or something. It was like they wanted to like brag about them and how much they knew about them. They just wanted to talk about them all the time. Like no matter what the conversation was, it was like they could always direct it back to this person that they love or think they love. And that's really it felt a lot like that when I was watching this interview. Even the detectives thought, like, this guy's a little odd. He was odd. He was. He almost bragged to them that he always watched her dogs in her house. He would even change his own schedule around if she was going out of town and she needed his help. Like if he had something going on, he would change it so that he could help her. He did openly admit that he had always had a crush on Diane and that she never reciprocated. But he said that it didn't cause any issues with them. They were friends. She knew that he had a crush on her. He knew that she didn't feel the same way. That was that. He said they never had a sexual relationship. He never kissed her. He did say, I always wanted to, but never did. And the police were like, so you're sure that you never had a sexual relationship with her? He said, yes, I'm sure. Never. And they said, so your DNA should not be on her. And he said, nope. And they said, well, would you be willing to give us a little DNA? And he said, sure, if you want it. And so even though he had a key, which he also admitted to, he had an alibi. He said that he was at work at IBM, and he was working late that stormy night. And did anybody see you? And he said, well, I have a key card that I have to scan in and out of the building. Plus there's cameras all over. There's cameras all over the parking lot. So, check those. I was there. He says he stayed late and drove home in the storm, got home around 10:30 p.m., never left his house, and was back at work the next morning at 8 a.m. I'm like, okay, we're going to check that. They took his fingerprints. They took his DNA. And then the last thing they asked him was about Dennis. They said, so do you know Dennis? And what do you think about Dennis and Dennis and Diane's relationship? And he kind of well, that's a loaded question. They're like, what do you mean? He's like, well, they were having problems. They were for sure having problems. That was about it. He didn't elaborate much more. So police said, okay, thank you. Ray was allowed to leave, and they were like, all right, well, let's see who else there is. We talked to Dennis. We talked to Ray. So friends of Diane's told police that Diane had a date that night, that Thursday night of the storm, with a man from the dating service. They tried to find this man. I don't think that they ever were able to determine who that date was, which probably means she didn't go through the dating service. Maybe she had been on a date with him before, but they did go ahead and contact the dating service. They interviewed every single man that she had a date with from It's Just Lunch. And apparently there was a good amount, and they talked to all of them. So at this point, there's a lot of potential suspects. Could it have been one of the men she went on a date with from It's Just Lunch? Maybe that one that she went on a date with the night of the storm? Could it have been her somewhat oddball coworker, Ray? Or was it someone closer to her, like her fiance, Dennis? Or was it someone totally different and random, which would make this a much harder case to solve? And we will get into that next time on part 2 of this story. And I promise you, I'll say this because I know people hate an unresolved. I've heard from a lot of people over the months that really dislike an unsolved murder. So I will tell you, this one does get solved. There is a conclusion to this one. Don't look it up, because I'm going to finish it next time. I don't know if I'll wait a whole week because it's late. This is Thursday. This was supposed to come out Tuesday. So I might record the rest of this tomorrow and put part 2 out tomorrow or Saturday, and then put part 3 out, Monday or Tuesday. I don't know. I've realized that this is not going to sadly not going to be a job or an income. It's just going to be because I enjoy doing it, and really I enjoy the people that I've met. I enjoy you, like listeners that I've met through Patreon and Instagram and talked to, and hoping to do a girls like cocktail hour in September here with I guess we could do girls and guys. I don't know if we have any guy listeners in Tucson, but certainly girls like cocktail hour out at a bar one night in September. And I feel like I've connected, especially because I've shared probably too much personal stuff on here, but I've shared a lot of personal stuff and a lot of, obviously, the breakup stuff, which I know those episodes are gone now, but the people who did listen to them or saw the social media post, whatever, like I said, a lot of our listeners, a lot of you guys helped me through that better than I would have gotten through it by myself. And I just, when we started, I didn't think we'd have any listeners. So the fact that we have people who have stuck around through all the kind of ups and downs that the podcast has taken, that's why I want to keep doing it. So all that is to say that at least at this point, at this level, I've realized that this is not, I would love this to be my full-time job and to put out a true crime story 5 days a week, but that's not going to happen. I also know that people like consistency. So don't worry, we're not going to like get away from the Monday bonus, Tuesday actual episode. We just happened to this week. And since we're already kind of off schedule this week, maybe it'll be a multi episodes this week. One today, because I don't think I'm going to edit this. I think I'm just going to put this out right now. Does that make me sound lazy if I say that? I'm not going to edit this. I just mean that there are no major parts that I need to cut out when I do it by myself. I feel like people who are listening understand who I am and how I tell a story now. So if I stumble over a word, I don't feel like I need to go back and remove that. But if I'd be interested, if people listen and are like, God, that's annoying. It's not a big deal. I could go back and find all the places I stumble or sniffle or whatever and cut that stuff out. So I guess, let me know if that's something that would make this more enjoyable for you. Otherwise, I just leave it in because I feel like this is me. This is how I am. This is how I talk. I stumble over words and stuff. So anyways, I think I'm just going to put this out right now. The video will be on Patreon. I'm not going to urge anyone to go join Patreon to look at it though, because I'm wearing a bathing suit cover up. My hair has coconut oil in it and I have no makeup on my face. So it's not a pleasant video, but I might tool around with trying to add some visuals to this video to make it more interesting and then re-put that out. So I don't know if that gets anybody amped up and excited, but I love editing video. So it does get me excited. I got a really nice email. I'll share that next time. But please I really enjoy the Instagram conversations. I feel like are more one-on-one and personal. So I don't tend to share those on here, but the emails and voicemails, like I love it. I love hearing your feedback. I love hearing your case suggestions for what to talk about on here, stories you want to hear, opinions, things that can make this better. Or just send me an email and tell me something interesting about you. Like I really enjoy getting them and I'm regularly checking the email now. So it's deathxsouthwest@gmail.com. And that's it. Thank you guys for listening. Tune in. I'll let you know as soon as I publish this. I'd say tune in tomorrow or Saturday for part 2 and to find out what happened to Diane. Okay, guys. Do I need to say all the things at the end still? Like, please leave us a review. Nothing makes my day more than when I read a review, even if it's a bad one, honestly. I mean, that hurts, but I still like that people are taking the time to share their thoughts. So please leave us a review or try our Patreon for a week because I've been posting a lot of stuff on there. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, all of those. And even if you do none of those, then just keep listening because that's what really matters. And thank you. Okay. Bye, guys.
Death by Southwest is hosted by Jenna Schneider and Margot Carmichael.
Executive produced by Margot Carmichael.
Produced by Jenna Schneider.
Audio editing and sound design by Margot Carmichael.
Music by Soundstripe.
And a special thanks to Edward R. Murrow for letting us borrow his famous sign-off phrase, good night and good luck.